Terry Redknapp here. You're listening to a proper podcast. It's the Alan Hudson podcast. It's proper football, proper talk.
Well, hello again. Thanks very much for joining us. We've got another great guest on the Alan Hudson podcast today. He basically the face of football on ITV in the 1980s and 1990s. But before we get to him, Alan's got a few words to say about. Over to you, Al.
Yeah, I'll get it right one day. To keep our shows going, we need you to sign onto our
YouTube platform.
Our YouTube platform. See, so you got to excuse me. I've been away for a few days, holiday, and I've come back with a bad throat. And Tony pushed me through this. I shouldn't have to do it. So if you go on YouTube and just see us and just sign on, and we'd be very appreciative. And then we can have more guests like Elton on. And actually, I wish I had the two Eltons on this morning. Get rid of Tony. Have Elton John at the top and Elton Welsby at the bottom.
Well, it's Elton John's birthday today, isn't it?
There you are. I'm after him as it happens. I'd like to. I just read his book, Elton. But it's all about Watford.
Yeah.
You know, Watford Football Club, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's just so intriguing of how this pop star, so, you know, probably the biggest in the world at one stage, who I met a couple of times, had the pleasure, loved his music. And he said Watford saved his life, you know. So it's quite amazing, you know, that one thing in his life that kept his feet on the floor.
Well, I've never met him, Al, but I was very close to Graham Taylor. We became friendly during the 1990 World Cup, Italian 90. And Graham used to tell me all sorts of stories about Elton John. Very, very favourable too.
Yeah.
Great. Graham thought the world of him. He really did.
Yes, I gathered that. You know, it was an absolute no-goer when he first met him.
Another Irish name.
Sorry.
When he first went to Elton's mansion, and you know, and they spoke about him taking over the club. You know, it was a no-goer. You know, Graham couldn't handle the high heels and the everything else. You know, but he come round to it and realised that he had a real passion for the club. You know, But you know, and looking back, and the reason I enjoyed the book so much is that you look at the people running the clubs today. You know, if they had a finger now of the passion that Elton John had for that club, you know, and the way they worked it, and they worked so fantastically well together, you know. And he had to be told off by Graham on several occasions about his attire, and they can't sit on the bed very quickly. In his first home game, Graham took his place on the bench, and he seen his figure coming down the stairs with high heels and all this on, and he sat on the bench next to him, and he nudged the fella. He said, "Who's that?" He said, "That's the chairman." So I'll have to have words with him.
I always put Bill Kenwright in the same category as Elton John. Bill Kenwright, chairman of my club Everton for so long, you know. Showbiz, chairman, but boyhood fans of the club, you know. And those chairmen are well, they've virtually gone now, haven't they?
Yeah, I knew Bill quite well, and sat next to him on a TV show, and sat next to him not really at a match one day, but I went up on the train doing a thing with Jonathan Pearson and met him a couple of times, and the only thing he lacked was a Graham Taylor. He didn't have a manager to have what he had, you know. Graham Taylor at Watford, you know, he pulled rabbits out of that.
I disagree with that to a certain extent, because Bill Kenwright and David Moyes, during David's first spell at Everton, which lasted for 12 years, they had a very good working relationship. In fact, the chairman didn't interfere. If David Moyes said, "I want a player," i.e., Tim Cahill from Millwall, then the chairman did everything he could to get that player, which, of course, in Cahill's case, he did.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, he did say. I mean, David Moyes. I see an interview with David Moyes the other day saying that the day that when Ferguson rang him and said, "You've got the Manchester United job," and he said, "My biggest worry, my biggest fear was telling Bill."
Yeah.
He said, "Don't tell anything. It's a secret. Don't even tell you." He said, "Tell your wife," but that's the last person you tell your wife, isn't it? Go down the shops,
Yeah.
But he said, "Don't tell anyone." He said, "To keep it secret." And he said it was murder going there every day. He said, "When I see Bill, I couldn't tell him." And, he looked like he jumped ship kind of thing, made him look the bad guy. But, so they were that close. But it was something, I suppose, although you're right in many ways, but they were both kind of gentlemen. This double act was unbelievable. You can't. I mean, I'd love to. But he really would have been perfect in our 1970s club, Elton John, when we had all the characters that we had, and the boys were down the King's Road with Richard Harris and Peter O'Toole and all this, and now we got a chairman. And he was a straight guy. He was a straight shooter, Elton. You knew exactly where you were with him. I found him great, but he would have been perfect. And probably the perfect matchup would have been him and the Matthew Harding, because he would have gotten well with Matthew. It was, those kind of things I like to look at. As I use my little jigsaw, put more in the jigsaw together, and so the perfect club. But.
Well,
That's a Watford thing out of the way anyway. But going back to yourself, when did you pack up on TV?
Well, the match, the live coverage of the then First Division football, that finished in '92, when Sky moved in and took over the exclusivity. But I still worked at Granada Television in the Northwest up until 2000.
Yeah.
Doing not just doing football, primarily football, what is now the EFL, but I did other things, like I presented the last series of Busman's Holiday. We had quizzes. We did Crown Green Bowls, Alan, which I absolutely loved. In the summer, we used to do 2 tournaments, and I fell in love with the game.
Where was you living then?
I live on the Wirral. I still do. I've always lived on the Wirral. Well, since I got married in 1977, I've always lived on the Wirral.
All right.
God's Little Acre, they call it.
Yeah, I went there. I've been there once for a funeral, and I bumped into Alan Hudson, of all people. We passed in the street.
Really?
Most of them boys had homes round that way. Yeah.
Well, Alan's more Southport way, but he's been over here playing golf a few times. But living nearby to me, and I bump into him every now and again. John Barnes, digger.
John Barnes is the one I'm still after getting on here. He's my probably. They got this thing about racial in the game and taking to the knee and all this crap. It's I love John Barnes. I watched him at Watford, and I see him at the Watford play for Watford at the Bridge one day, and I thought, what a talent this is, And
oh yeah.
Then I met him quite a time after that, and he was just one of us. He would have fit perfectly into our Chelsea team. With Charlie Cook and people like him and Barnes, And he told me a wonderful story once. I got up and did a speech in Manchester one night, and there was a few old faces there. And I told a story about playing in my first season, playing against Cruyff, obviously George, Johan, and Pele in Kingston. all in the first season. I said, when we played against, we had a drink with Pele till 3:00 in the morning in Kingston, Jamaica. So I finished the speech and whatever, went down, and he come over to me, he's juggling his wine, he was. And he said, do you know that night in Kingston? I went, yeah. He said, I was one of the ball boys.
Really?
Really? Work that out.
Yeah.
He said, I was a chair. I wanted, it was all about, I wanted, watch Chelsea, but the big event was all about Pele, and the biggest crowd they've ever had on the island. The fans were up the trees and everything. No one could get in and all that. But I said, oh my God, if only we'd have known, But he probably wouldn't have got in the Chelsea team because Sexton would have smelt his breath and that would have been him finished, the way he was. But he was a great, and he's more than a footballer, isn't he? He's very intellectual. He's at the other side of it, and
yes. Well, his dad was a diplomat, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we've really got to get into Elton's career. I mean, like I said in the introduction, I mean, you really were the face of ITV football in the 80s and 90s, and I mean, you must have rubbed shoulders with all the great and the good of that era.
Oh, very much so. I worked quite often. My studio guest, Brian Clough, George Best, who Alan obviously knows particularly well. But I started in radio in 1974, and a colleague of mine was Bill Shankly.
Wow.
There you go.
I mean, now there is a character, Alan. Believe me, I have never met anybody who comes close to Bill Shankly as a character, a larger than life guy. Fluffy, very, very close. But Bill Shankly was just fantastic. When I started Radio City, it was in October 1974, and Bill Shankly was asked by the MD to do a series of chat shows. Was asked to do a series of chat shows. And the first guest he had, it would be late October 74 or early November 74, was the then Prime Minister, Harold Wilson. And he was Shankly's first guest. And it was an education to listen to the two of them, Wilson wanted a pint. This would be about 11 o'clock in the morning. Wilson had a pint of beer, smoked his pipe, and Bill sort of interrogated him. One of the things he said they were on first name terms after about 2 minutes. And he said, Harold, who was the very first socialist? And Wilson is sort of on his pipe, would it be Ramsay MacDonald, Bill? No, it was Jesus Christ. And it carried on like this. It was an hour of pure gold, and unfortunately the tape had been lost. Such was the way things were in those days. But
because you were the kind of like we were, weren't you? You were dressed up and all the gear and all that. You had always stood out as, didn't you? You made sure that you was a step ahead with the clothing and all that. You always had your long hair and your gear on.
Yeah. That all disappeared, and a bit like yours.
Yeah. Well, it does it. I think when you get these people on interviews now, I think I shake my head, what they're talking about and whatever. But the first impression is everything, and I think you think, oh well, we could get on,
Well, I look at what they wear nowadays, and it's t-shirts, jeans. I always used to dress in a suit. I don't think I was ever told to dress in a suit. You just did, shirt and tie, and always look very, very smart. I think those standards have dropped a little bit, deteriorated.
Without a doubt, and it's and with it, other things, that is. I was reading someone. I was listening to someone the other day. I think it might have been Ali McCoist. Ali McCoist said they used to have to wear a shirt and tie to go in training
I
with
could well
Glasgow,
believe it.
with Glasgow Rangers.
Yeah.
Now, can you believe that? You know.
Well, the protocol was always very, very high at Rangers, wasn't it? Always has been. You know, certainly when they were travelling, they always wore the club blazer, the club tie. You know,
Yeah.
etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, at Chelsea in 1970, we couldn't afford a shirt and tie. You know, the money we were on. It was all. That's why we were dressed like we were dressed to get down to King's Road. You know.
And I know you've got a new book out, haven't you, Elton? Game for a Laugh.
Yes, that's right, Tony. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that and some of the stories. I mean, I know you won't want to give too much away, but
I don't mind. That's okay. That's okay. It's going very well. Thank you very much. It's basically my career starting in broadcasting, which starts in 1974, and obviously around about that era, Shankly plays a big part in my career. So I basically talk about the personalities that that I met and I worked with and socialized with. One, I'd say one of my, if not my favorite guy that I used to work with, who will have kicked Alan numerous times, I am sure, Big Jack Charlton.
Never kicked me once, mate. Never kicked me once.
So
I never went that far up the field, Elton.
Right. So he let Hunter took care of you, did he?
No, it was that Hunter and Charlton had this thing in the early days with Osgood and Hutchinson.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. And,
Right.
And believe it or not, Hutchinson was Ozzy's minder.
Yeah.
So
Bremner and Giles would take care of you. Is that fair enough?
Well, I wouldn't say
someone would have
care.
had a go. Come on, you were such a good player. Someone would have been having a go at you. Do me a favour. It's me you're talking to.
I must say, one of my hardest ever opponent. But I was not having a very good time myself at the time, and I played better. We'd have knocked Arsenal out of the cup. Was Peter Storey.
Oh yes, he's a tough nut.
And as luck not as luck would have it, the strangest thing in life, you know, he was like, he didn't kick you, you know. He would kick you if you tried to take the piss.
Yeah.
You know, he would kick you, but he was always there. Always seems to be there when you was getting hold of the ball. But as I say, I wasn't having a very, very good time at the time. And remember, we got beat at Highbury in the sixth round, Tone.
1972.
A dodgy penalty.
Yeah.
And the strangest thing is in life, you know, when I went to Arsenal, he was my first roommate, although it was only for one trip. And then I don't know what changed. I think because Peter was probably leaving the club. I think Peter might have went to Fulham from there, and Terry Neal was changing things around. And the night before I had my near fatal car accident, I was at my friend. Did you ever come across Martin Knight? He might be a little bit too young for.
No.
Well, he's done very well he's a bit of an entrepreneur. He's a great friend of mine. Well, he ran this business and he had his Christmas party. I got hit by the car on December 15th. So the night before, he had a Christmas party in the city. And I was there. I'd been out all day as usual. And I end up at the thing. And about 2:00 in the morning, I said, I've got to go, Martin. He ordered a taxi, but who picks me up in a minicab driver but Peter Storey? Unbelievable. It's unbelievable, you know. And he got me back to East London, and that was that. Then I was straight, you know, the following day I was in a coma. But it's a wonder I weren't in a coma the other times I've been on the field with him, you know. But he was a lovely, but you know, you got them people that kick people, and you know the likes you mentioned.
Jack had this supposedly he had a black book with players that he wanted to seek revenge on. Now that was a myth. But he did tell me once. We had a wonderful time in the European Championships in Sweden in '92, where Jack and I just lived together for about 4 weeks, and he told me that the top of his list, the player that he really wanted to get, was Johnny Morrissey, who played for Everton. You know, one of the Everton players who won the championship in 1970 with that wonderful midfield, who I'm sure outsmarted you on 1 or 2 occasions, Kendall, Ball, and Harvey, the ultimate midfield trio. That's what we thought, obviously, as Evertonians.
Yeah. The Holy Trinity, they called them, didn't they?
They did. There's been a couple of holy. In fact, in the north, there have been 3 holy trinities. There's Best Law and Charlton, Bell, Lee, and Somerby, and the ultimate one, Kendall, Ball, and Harvey.
Well, yeah. And you had Alan Ball was a shining light, though, wasn't he? The other 2 were great players. He was
the. I mean, Alan, I first saw Everton in 1962. And I became an Evertonian on the strength of the first game that I saw. They happened to win 8-3 against Cardiff, and Alex Young had a most wonderful game. And I kind of fell in love with Everton at that point. But I still say to this day, and I include the team that won the championship in '85 and '87, that my favourite player of all time at Everton was Bawley.
Yeah, I understand that.
Oh, and we became good friends as well. So it's they were.
Especially where there was a glass involved, you would become good friends. Go on, Tony.
I just want to mention Alan's 1966 World Cup winning teammate, Jack. You've mentioned him a couple of times. What's your favourite Jack Charlton story, Elton?
Jack Charlton story. Well, there's Alan will know this, that Jack wasn't great with names. He wasn't particularly good with names. And we were doing a game at Ellen Road one day, and it was against Manchester United, and Andrei Kanchelskis was playing for United. And I thought to myself, hey, Jack's going to struggle with this. So I gave him a lesson on how to pronounce Kanchelskis, and in fact he cracked it, and so we got to half time. It was, and there was a move, Kanchelskis going down the right, and Kanchelskis, and he crossed the ball in. You know, I thought, God, he's got it, fantastic, and the goalkeeper came out, John Lukic. Jack pronounced it Lukic. I thought we'd done the hard bit. Oh God. But Jack was wonderful company. Wonderful.
What do you think?
I'll tell you another story. Do you mind?
No.
This is quite interesting. I think you'll both like this. We were at Gothenburg. Jack insisted on calling it the way the locals did, Uterberg. And we were doing a match there, and Jack and I were sat in the presentation area, out in the open amongst the fans, basically. And this was about an hour and a half before the kickoff, and I just happened to look down, and there was Sir Bobby Charlton, eating a sandwich. And I said, "Hey, Jack, your brother's down there, your kid." And he goes, "Miserable bastard." And I said, "Oh, no, don't be like that, Jack. He's your brother, Jack. For God, something could happen to him and you'll regret it. Time's short. Life is short. Say hello to him." So Bobby's eating a sandwich. Jack looks down and says, "Good, gizzard, mate." And Bobby just looked up and continued eating his sandwich. And Jack said, "I told you, miserable bastard." They didn't get on.
But it's amazing. It's an amazing thing. I mean, no one could ever get to the bottom of Bobby, or from the moment the first time I played against him, I didn't. I thought football was all about fun and entertainment, and no matter you're winning or losing, there's going to be sometimes in a game where there's going to be, a little bit of fun.
That's so refreshing to hear that, Alan, because that is something that is totally out of the game at the moment in time.
Yeah.
Totally.
I've just found Bobby moaned all the time, moaned to referees and moaned to his own team, and when George got the ball, moaned, because he never give it to him and all that. And and times went on, and I never spoke one word to him, even when I was in the England squad a couple of times, 3 times. He never spoke to me or nothing like that, you know, which I found a bit weird because I've always got time for the youngsters, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and
well, it goes back to the rift between Bobby and Jack went back to when their mother was not very well, and it was down to Jack and his missus, you know, to look after Sissy, you know, and Bobby didn't do much at all, you know, and that's really got to Jack.
well,
he blamed Lady Norma, Sir Bobby's wife.
right. So that was
But it's
that
still-
was their rift, but they didn't have to take it out on the rest of the world, you know what I mean? They keep that at home, you know.
Well, I'm
But-
sure you found Jack great company, didn't you? Crikey.
I didn't really know Jack. I didn't really. The
Ah,
last time I'd
okay.
see Jack was the one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Was at Gordon Banks's funeral, and his son was talking to him every word that was going on. You know, he wasn't complimented there, and that was really, really sad. You know, and that is why you got to have a bit of fun when you're playing a game, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But going back to the thing with Bobby, around a year, I think it might have been after my accident in the 2000s. And I'd been out in the afternoons of football. It might have been a football writers in. I was always on Jeff Powell's table, and I was walking through the foyer, and Bobby was standing there looking at a phone or a piece of paper. I didn't really take much notice. And I walked by, and as I walked by, and there was only us 2 there, he just said to me, without lifting his head, "Alan, take care of yourself." And it was like a bolt out the blue.
Mhm.
I really didn't know what to do, and I didn't stop. I didn't really, as if he didn't want me to stop, because he never moved. He never kind of invited me into a conversation, and I just felt it really strange. And I thought he obviously knew that I'd had the car thing, and I was out in the afternoon having a drink and all that, and I found that really weird. And then I watched the Munich thing all over again, and I really, deeply down inside, I thought he's being the way he was being, because I heard him one night say that, you know, I feel like a cheat with all them young kids dying on the plane, and
Yeah.
I survived it, you know.
I mean, when you watch those documentaries, what have you, about Munich, it must have been absolutely horrifying to be a part of it, and to have so many of your colleagues and friends of the club as well who died.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I've never been. You've had a terrible car accident. I'm lucky. I've never had anything like that. So all I can do is, from the outside looking in, you know, realize it must have been absolutely horrific, you know.
Well, I found I've got this outlook on life where, you know, my mother used to say to me in hospital, "Why are you so happy going into the operating theatre?" I said, "Because I know when I go in, I'm going to come out one step better than going in."
Yeah.
That's basically, that's why I'm happy, and it doesn't frighten me going in there. It frightens me doctors at Chelsea who couldn't, you know, couldn't cure anything, but these people were top surgeons, you know, and I used to talk to them in the operating room, and they used to talk about football with me, and that we used to have a laugh, and then the girl would come along and put you out, and then you're laughing as you're going in, as you're going 10, 9, 8. And that's it, you know, and I would come out and I was happy, you know, but, and I was always, even after, people gone to me, "Why are you still having a good time?" You know, I said, "Well, that's what we're here for," you know, but God knows what would have happened if I'd have been on that air crash.
Oh.
You just don't really know how you would have felt, would you? I mean, as you said, your best friends, your
Or
pals.
how you react if you survive. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It seems that from what you're saying, it strikes me that Bobby was on some kind of guilt trip, thinking, well, I should have been one of them. You know, and then you look at the way Harry Gregg reacted, who was outside the plane thrown outside the plane virtually, or climbed out, and then went back in to take
Yeah, sure.
grab people out.
Yeah, yeah,
Mikey, how people react is you don't
yeah.
know until you're confronted with that situation. You don't know.
No, absolutely. But I do put that down to Bobby, and to carry that around with you for your whole life is, you know, you think you go and see someone about it, a spiritualist or something, you know, I was dealing with a woman called Betty Shine, who I cried out to her when I was in hospital. I cried out to her, and she phoned my family and said, "Can I speak to Alan? He's cried out to me. He wants help." And she was like a medium, you know, and she told me, she wrote a book, The Infinite Mind. I'm in the book, and it tells you in the book, everything she told me is in the book. And she said, "Bob, your mate Bobby Moore sends his regards, and he's up there with the boys from the Munich. You know, they're all right. You know, that kind of stuff. You know, and whether you believe it or not, but she knew. How did she know I was so close to Bobby Moore? You know,
Who knows?
Bobby is. Yeah,
I
Tony's
don't.
trying to say something.
My response when I hear stories like that is, I really would like to believe that it's you know, that it's true, that there is an afterlife. Yeah, I do believe in God, but you know, the afterlife, the way heaven is painted, I don't know. It seems a
Well,
little
if there
bit
was an afterlife, I'd bring you back to run the television again.
Thank
Get
you.
you on all your and do it all over. Not like these today.
Well, hang on, Elton.
And if that were the case, Alan, I'd still wear a suit.
Absolutely, I know you would.
Elton,
That's why you're getting the job.
Elton, I've got to pull you up there.
Yeah.
Because you actually work with God, Brian Clough.
That is very true. Yeah. The greatest manager England never had. He was a legend. I was with him. I don't know whether this guy's a friend of yours, Al, or whether you got on with him or whatever. Emlyn Hughes, and we were doing a game at the City Ground. Me and Emlyn, and after the match, Clough invited us in for a drink, and there was only just the three of us, you know. And he hit me with one I never saw coming. He said, "Hey, I believe you take me off." Now, I'd done a dinner in Derby 2 or 3 months beforehand, and obviously someone who knew Cloughie was there and told him. So I used to tell a gag with doing a poor imitation of Brian Clough, and he said, "Go on, do it." So, crikey, I said, "Okay, here we go. This is the story that I tell. It's a joke, Brian, but I tell it as if it's you. What's the difference between a Leeds United fan and a Jehovah's Witness? When a Leeds United fan knocks on your door, he tells you to fuck off." Now, Cloughie just roared and he went, "Do it again." So I did it again. And he said, "Hey, you do me better than Mike fucking Yarwood." But we had I worked with him many times. And you know, I got away with it. I came out of it unscathed, Al. Seriously, he never ever had a pop at me. There was one time I thought he had, but he hadn't. I was talking to Ronnie Fenton, very close to Cloughie's office. Cloughie came out to greet the press corps who were there after a match, and he looked over at me and he went, "Welsby, shithead." And I thought, what? I said to Ronnie Fenton, "What have I done?" And he said, "Oh," he said, "don't worry about that." He said, "That's Brian. He's funny like that. That means he likes you."
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fair enough. It was a term of endearment. Shithead.
Well, I met him on a couple of occasions. I can only say, you know, there's. I can remember going to Old Trafford once, and I'd been drinking with Sir Alex at Upton Park a few weeks earlier, having a glass of red and talking about things and all that. And he was, you know, And I went up with my son and a couple of friends to Old Trafford. I weren't going to the game. I had to meet Brian Robson. And we went in. Two of them were having the tickets, and I was going round the corner to see Sammy McElroy, strangely enough. And we're walking through, and I was telling them in the car that I was drinking with Fergie. I said, he's all right, Fergie. He'll probably invite us into the office to have a glass of wine. Anyway, he come walking towards us, a face like thunder. And he says, and I don't know where you're fucking going. So I've gone, I'm looking behind me, going, yeah, you. He said, get out. He threw us out, threw the four of us out. So the other three have laughed at me. He said, yeah, you get on really well with him, don't you? So I've got outside, phoned Brian again. He went, take no notice of him. We've just had a bad team meeting and he's got one on. Just come back up, come. I said, but say I'll bump into him again. He does it again. He's gonna. No, he said he'll get over it. Don't worry, you know. And it was a little bit like that. So I, and I found. Well, I suppose the point I'm trying to make. He like Brian Clough. If Brian Clough said that to me, I would take it as well because I think you have every right to do that as long as your reasons are right. But he had the wrong reason. Because you do own Manchester United, what you've done at this club, and I think Clough is. I
think. I mean, the number of titles that Fergie's won, the European Cup, and all that. I still think the greatest managerial achievement, bigger than say Bob Paisley or Sir Alex, was Cloughy taking Forest out of the then second division to win the championship, to win the European Cup, and then to win the European Cup again. That will never, ever happen again. You can see, I suppose it has happened in comparison to Fergie with Man City and Pep Guardiola, 4 titles on the spin. But I don't think anyone now will, for example, take, say, Leeds out of the Championship now, into the Premier League, win the Premier League, and then win the Champions League. That will not happen.
No, I think there's no dispute in that. There is no argument against that. It's and you if you put their name on paper, they wouldn't live with everybody else that won the championship. They would have no chance. They had no. But it's like Leicester when they won the league. It was a 5,000 to 1 shot. It was a year that Donald Trump was 5,000 to 1 to become president, and Leicester were 5,000 to 1 to win the league. If only we'd had that double, we would, we wouldn't be asking for people to sign on before the show. Yeah. But that couldn't happen twice. Leicester couldn't go on to win the Europe because they didn't have the management capability. But what he done with that set of players was, and I agree with you. That was.
I personally think that. I still believe that is the greatest managerial achievement in football history. I really do believe that.
Let me ask you another one, seeing Brian so well. It's never really been discussed in length. Do you believe he went to Leeds to build another team, or do you believe he went to Leeds to ruin them?
That's a very good question. I don't think he went to Leeds to ruin them. I think he couldn't stand Revie. I think he wanted to go, and with pretty much the same team, maybe with 1 or 2 little changes, to win the First Division title in a better way than Revie did. I know that's been documented in the Damn United and what have you, but I really do believe that was the case. But he had a loathing.
But do you believe deep down that he thought that them players were going to respond to all his management ways when, even when Revie was, the couple of times I was in a dressing room with Revie before a game, you grow to hate the man. There's no love. There is no there's no, what a nice fella. As soon as I met Waddington, he changed my life, and he was like another father, and he was what can I do for you? Yeah. If you need any help, you know where my door is. don't worry about what you've been doing at Chelsea. He says you're doing everything right, but in the wrong order. But you'll learn how to do it, you know. But that made no sense to me. But so I took to him straight away. There was nothing Revy had that could endear yourself to him.
No, well, that was Cloughie. If you want to call it a problem, that was Cloughie's problem. He did not like Revy, but Cloughie was also a purist. Out, you know, the old thing. You know, footballers would have wings. You know, if the ball was meant to be in the air. You know, the game is played on grass, and that's what Cloughie believed, and that's what he got his Nottingham Forest team to. It's what he got his Derby team to do before that. But in terms of, I wouldn't say he bit off more than he could chew by taking on the likes of Giles, Bremner, you know, Big McQueen was there then, wasn't he? I don't know. I certainly didn't go out to ruin Leeds. I don't believe that, because I don't think that would have been, I don't think it's part of his makeup. He would have wanted to be a winner with Leeds, but he wanted to do it his way. And he did introduce one or two new players, didn't he? Mackenzie, he brought in.
Well, he brought, as in the film, he brought a couple in at first as his spies.
Yeah, John O'Hare being one.
Yeah, and McGovern.
Yeah, and McGovern. Yeah,
Yeah.
O'Hare and McGovern.
They were the ones who had told him in the dressing room what was going on. There was too many. That couldn't have happened. He couldn't. I mean, he could, if he could do that with Nottingham Forest, win 2 European Cups, and then you've got all these Leeds so-called great players: Giles, Bremner, Eddie Gray, Clark Jones. You know.
Yeah, and don't forget when he went to Leeds, you know, he went without Peter Taylor.
Yeah.
You know, Peter was at Brighton then, so he was on his own. He didn't have that shoulder to lean on. I just think it was wrong. It was a bad fit from start to finish. 33 days. I don't think that was long enough. But player power won the day. And defeated Cloughie at Allen Road, no question about that. But he hated Leeds before he went there. Amazing, in fact, that he did actually go. But he hated them even more afterwards because of what happened to him. It was a great blow to his ego, you know, that he was sacked after 33 days. I mean, he had a massive ego, Cloughie.
Along them lines, Tony Waddington was offered the job before him.
I didn't know that.
He was offered the job before Brian Clough, and he was very, very good friends with Brian Clough. He used to go on the European trips with him, and unbeknown to all of us, I didn't realise that until when we got in Europe and Brian Clough came with us, and I said, what's all that about? Someone said, well, he goes away with Clough. They're thick as thieves, you know, 2 completely different people, but 2 great friends and 2 geniuses on the game, you know. When you've mentioned about the best manager in England ever, I believe Waddington would have been. But put them both together, and you got a powerhouse. You know.
Waddington would have appealed to the FA more than Cloughie.
Absolutely.
Because Waddington was a diplomat. He wasn't a loud, outspoken type the way Cloughie was. He would have suited West Ham, England, down to the ground the way that Ron Greenwood did.
Yeah, and Joe Mercer, they were around, weren't they? You know, but
very much.
You know, I remember when Tony went for the job at Leeds, and they finished the meeting, and they thought he was going to say, "Thank you, I'll take the job," and he said, "Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to come here." He said, "But it's not for me. This club is not." Silvers, was it? Silver? Or whatever his name was.
Manny Silver, was it? Manny.
Yeah.
I think.
And he turned it down. He said, and as he left, he opened the door and he said to him, "But if I can give you one bit of advice, the perfect manager for you now would be go down to London and get a young Terry Venables. He's going to be the best manager there we've seen." And he told the Leeds hierarchy to do that and walked out.
Of course, Terry ended up. He did go to Leeds. He wasn't there very long, but he did actually go to Leeds.
Well, he
at one
done there.
point,
He
didn't he?
went there to do a quick job, quick fix, didn't he? For
Yeah.
a few quid.
Well, there were a few of those as well, weren't
Yeah,
there? David
yeah.
O'Leary,
Yeah.
Although O'Leary, in fairness, didn't do a bad job at Leeds.
Yeah, yeah.
We've probably got to the stage where we're close to wrapping up. I mean, it's been fascinating hearing your stories, Elton. Can I ask you to recall a sort of standout moment from the time where you mixed with the elite of football in the 80s and the 90s? What stands out for you?
Well, the game that stands out above all others, and I think I can't see Alan arguing with this, the greatest finish ever to a top flight season was in '89 when Liverpool played Arsenal at Anfield. Liverpool hadn't been beaten since New Year's Day, and Arsenal had to win by 2 clear goals to win the championship. My studio guest was Bobby Robson, Sir Bob, and everyone couldn't see beyond Liverpool winning that night and winning the title, even drawing, getting a draw, and they'd win the title. If they lost 1-0 or 2-1, they'd win the title. It was a foregone conclusion. I nearly went into my Clough then. It was a foregone conclusion, who was going to win. And Arsenal won 2-0. And that game goes down, for me anyway, as probably without no fear of contradiction, the greatest finale to any season in the history of football.
It's a funny thing you say, because I see Paul Merson did a show up in Stoke one night. I was in the audience, and he spoke about this game. And he said, "Don't make no mistake here." He said George had it all planned to a T. He said, "You're coming half time. Don't be going out there trying to score early. Don't go out there. You don't have to be winning at half time. Don't worry about it. Just frustrate them."
Yeah.
Just frustrate them. While they're not scoring, they're worried, And he said, "We got the first one, and that was it." And he said, "Maybe win it in the last minute." And Paul Merson told that story. It's obviously it's probably a made-up story, but that's the kind of thing. And George, when you look at it, George had nothing. Arsenal had nothing to lose that night. They'd have come second gracefully, wouldn't they?
Absolutely.
That was a miracle result, and they done it, and it was just. And Merson just told that in his speech, and you think to yourself, I don't know Merson well enough to say, did that really happen? Or did you make that up?
Well, I did an interview with George Graham at a hotel in Liverpool at round about 2:00 the afternoon of the game, and the last thing he said to me was, "I'll tell you what, if we score 1, we'll score 2." And he said it in such a way that you believed him. It was just the delivery, the way he said it. I thought, he really thinks they're going to do this. He must be the only person on the planet who thinks they're going to do it.
Absolutely, especially the result itself. To win 1-0 would have been the same, but to win by the 2 goals. I think he had such a great belief in his back line that he thought they ain't going to let her go in tonight. So we can take our time and it'll come.
Well, they played an extra man at the back. At the back. But also they had their outlet up front was Alan Smith. I mean, he was man of the match by a mile. He was absolutely sensational on the night. Scored the first goal and got the flick on to Michael Thomas, who got the winner. Fantastic. Bobby, just to finish on a high note, Tony, I was next to Bobby Robson, and just behind me was Ian St. John, who was sat on nothing more like a bar stool. And when Michael Thomas scored, which effectively won the title for Arsenal, Ian St. John went like that, threw his head into his hands and fell off his stool. And at the final whistle, Bobby Robson kept saying, this game never ceases to amaze me.
Yeah.
This game never ceases to, and he kept repeating this little phrase, you know.
Well, that's how incredible it was. Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah. You know,
Absolutely.
if they played it another 1,000 times, that you wouldn't get that result. It's
Well, say, I
you
mean,
know.
you know,
Fabulous.
Liverpool hadn't lost since New Year's Day.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And it always stands out, doesn't it? McMahon turning round to him on the
Yeah.
centre circle and go, yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Oh, it was, but that's the answer to your question, Tony. Without a doubt, that game, it was
Great answer as
always
well.
like the Kennedy assassination. People remember where they were when they found out that Liverpool had lost and Arsenal had won the title that night. It was incredible.
It's a lovely way to round off this podcast, Elton. It's been great having you on. Can we wish you all the best with your book? Hope it goes well. Going for a laugh.
Certainly.
Are you
Thank
doing
you.
any book dues in London?
I wouldn't have thought so, Al.
No.
I wouldn't have thought so. But it's a book that would appeal to anybody who actually enjoys the great characters that I work with. It would. Stories, Bestie, Cruyff, all people that you'd have known and played against, you know, because that was the era.
Right.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed
That's what
doing
we're
it.
lacking. That's what we're lacking today. Absolutely.
Characters.
You know, the kid come on. The kid come on for England last night, Eze. And as much as I like Bowden, he is a good player for West Ham. He is a good player, and I think he'll fit in well. But he had a nightmare last night. His every last ball was cut out. They defended for their lives, but that Eze come on and he produced one bit of magic. It got deflected, it went in, but he beat 3 players in a space of like 8 yards, 6 yards, and he just done this and done that.
Do you remember, did you ever see Bestie's goal? It was when he was in America. I think it might have been for San Jose Earthquakes, where he beat 5 players inside the penalty area with hardly by breaking stride, just by dropping his hip, moving one, and then feinting to go the other way, you know, and then putting the ball in the back of the net.
That was Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale, was it?
And the Americans didn't know what he was doing. They were, you know, they didn't.
No, it was, well, soccer was very much in its infancy then, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
I remember putting that goal on Granada whenever it was in the 70s, late 70s, very early 80s. And I put that goal on Granada and no one had seen it, you know, and everyone was just open mouthed, you know, looking at this wonderful bit of improvisation and goal scoring ability by Best, you know. Great player. Great player. Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yes.
We must do this again, Tony.
Yes, we'll do it. Maybe we'll do a part 2, Elton. Are you up for that?
I'm more than up for that. We haven't touched. I mean, some of the players Alan and I can talk about. You know, we've just mentioned one, and we've hardly touched the surface with him.
Absolutely,
George.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's still on my wall. My big photograph on my wall. Sadly missed.
Oh yes. Yeah. Denis. I worked with Denis for years. Denis Law. You know.
Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 of the podcast.
We'll do a part 2.
In the meantime,
Elton, good luck with your book.
Thank you once again.
Cheers, Alan. Cheers, Tony. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Keep well.